In a quiet little neighborhood nestled around Lake Ranch, life was usually peaceful. The mornings were calm, with residents sipping their coffee on porches or taking leisurely walks by the lake. Evenings brought breathtaking sunsets that painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was the kind of place where people came to escape the chaos of city life and enjoy some tranquility. But beneath this serene surface, tensions occasionally bubbled up, usually over something small, like parking rules or lawn maintenance. For Alex Carter, one of the longtime residents, things were about to take an unexpected turn. Alex hadn't always been involved in the Homeowners Association, HOA. In fact, they had spent years avoiding it altogether. The HOA at Lake Ranch had earned a reputation for being overly strict, nitpicky, and sometimes downright unreasonable. Past leaders often enforced bizarre regulations that left neighbors frustrated. But when no one else stepped forward during the last election, Alex decided it was time to step up. They figured if someone didn't bring some common sense into the mix, the entire community might implode under the weight of petty grievances. So there Alex was, sitting behind a cluttered desk in the tiny HOA office located at the edge of the property. Papers were stacked everywhere, requests for rule changes, complaints about noise levels, notes from board meetings. It wasn't glamorous work, but Alex felt a responsibility to make things better. That's when the door swung open without so much as a knock, and in walked Karen Miller. Now, if you lived in Lake Ranch, chances are you'd heard of Karen. She wasn't just any resident. She was that resident, the one who seemed to have an opinion on everything and wasn't shy about voicing it. People joked about her behind closed doors, calling her HOA Karen because of how aggressively she enforced even the smallest rules. Whether it was reporting someone for leaving their trash cans out too long or demanding fines for holiday decorations left up past January 1st, Karen made sure everyone knew she meant business. She marched into the office like she owned the place, her heels clicking sharply against the tiled floor. Her arms were crossed tightly over her chest, and her lips were pressed into a thin line, a clear sign she wasn't happy. Without preamble, she launched into a tirade about recent changes to the landscaping policies. Apparently, the new guidelines which allowed slightly taller hedges along property lines were unacceptable to her. She argued they would ruin the aesthetic of the neighborhood and lower property values. Alex listened patiently, nodding occasionally while trying to keep their cool. They explained that the decision had been made democratically after several discussions and votes by the board. Everyone had a chance to weigh in, including Karen herself. But none of that mattered to her. She kept raising her voice, pacing back and forth, and accusing Alex of favoritism and incompetence. As the conversation dragged on, Alex could feel their patience wearing thin. This wasn't the first time Karen had shown up unannounced to argue about something trivial, and it probably wouldn't be the last. Still, Alex tried to stay professional, reminding themselves that this was part of the job. But Karen wasn't satisfied with explanations or logic. Instead, she grew angrier, her face turning red as she leaned across the desk. "You're making a huge mistake," she snapped, jabbing a finger toward Alex, "and you'll regret crossing me." For a moment, Alex just stared at her, unsure whether to laugh or sigh. Was this really happening? Here they were, volunteering their time to improve the community, and now they were being threatened by someone who couldn't handle not getting her way. Finally, Alex spoke up, their tone firm but calm. "Look, I've done nothing wrong here. These decisions were made fairly, and I'm not going to undo them just because you don't agree." Karen glared at them for what felt like an eternity, before spinning around and storming out of the office. As the door slammed shut behind her, Alex let out a deep breath they didn't realize they'd been holding. For a brief moment, they hoped that would be the end of it. Maybe Karen would cool off and move on. But deep down, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Little did they know, Karen's exit line wasn't just empty bluster. She meant every word, and she already had a plan brewing in her mind. What happened next would test Alex's resolve, challenge their leadership, and force them to confront just how far some people will go to get their way. The rest of the afternoon passed quietly for Alex after Karen's dramatic exit. They tidied up the office, filed away some paperwork, and made a mental note to send out reminders about the upcoming community cleanup day. It was shaping up to be another ordinary evening until something unusual happened. Flashing red and blue lights appeared outside the window. At first, Alex thought maybe there was an accident on the nearby road. The main street leading to Lake Ranch occasionally saw speeding drivers, so it wasn't uncommon for emergency vehicles to pass through. But when the lights didn't move and instead seemed to grow brighter, Alex stepped outside to investigate. Standing in the parking lot were two police officers, their expressions unreadable as they approached. One of them, a tall man with a clipboard in hand, called out, "Are you Alex Carter?" Alex nodded cautiously, feeling a knot tighten in his stomach. "Yes, that's me. Is everything okay?" The officer exchanged a quick glance with his partner before responding. "We've received a complaint against you. Someone reported that you refused to leave private property despite being asked multiple times. Can we speak with you about this?" For a moment, Alex just stood there, stunned. Refused to leave? Private property? None of it made sense. This was the HOA office, a space designated specifically for managing community affairs. Alex had every right to be here. And yet, according to the officer, someone had called 911 claiming otherwise. "Wait, hold on," Alex said, holding up a hand. "This is my office. I'm the president of the HOA. Who said I was trespassing?" The second officer, a woman with sharp eyes, chimed in. "Ma'am, all we know is what was reported. If you could come with us to the station to clarify things, that would help clear this up." Alex wanted to argue, to explain right then and there how ridiculous the accusation was. But they knew better than to resist or escalate the situation. Further, with a heavy sigh, they locked the office door and climbed into the back seat of the patrol car, watching as the familiar streets of Lake Ranch rolled by outside the window. The ride felt endless. Each passing mile only deepened Alex's frustration and confusion. How had this happened? Who would make such a wild claim? The pieces started falling into place when they realized who the likely culprit was. Karen. She had stormed out earlier, vowing revenge, and now her threat had materialized in the form of flashing lights and handcuffs, or at least the implication of trouble. When they arrived at the station, Alex was led into a small, sterile room with a table and a couple of chairs. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the walls. For nearly 2 hours, they answered question after question about the incident. Did they refuse to leave the office? Had anyone confronted them about staying too long? Were they aware of any disputes with other residents? Alex patiently explained the truth, that they were legally allowed to be in the office, that Karen had barged in uninvited, and that her accusations were baseless. Still, the officers took meticulous notes, treating the situation seriously even though it sounded absurd. Alex couldn't help but wonder if Karen had somehow managed to twist the story enough to sound credible. After all, she had a knack for making mountains out of molehills. As the interrogation dragged on, exhaustion began to set in. Alex leaned back in their chair, rubbing their temples. Just when they thought they'd have to spend the night in the station, the door creaked open and a new voice filled the room. "Is my boss in here?" Alex looked up, startled. Standing in the doorway was none other than Sheriff Mike Reynolds, the county's 911 chief. He was a well-known figure around Lake Ranch, respected for his fairness and no-nonsense approach to law enforcement. His presence alone commanded attention, but what really caught Alex off guard was the way he greeted them with warmth and familiarity. "Hey, don't worry," Mike said, waving off the other officers. "Everything's fine now." Turning to them, he added, "Sorry about this mix-up. We'll get it sorted out." It turned out that Mike lived in the same subdivision and had heard whispers of Karen's antics over the years. More importantly, he knew Alex personally, not just as a neighbor, but also because Alex ran a successful construction company where one of Mike's nephews worked. Once Mike learned about the supposed trespassing call, he immediately intervened, dismissing the charges and apologizing for the misunderstanding. Relieved but still shaken, Alex thanked Mike profusely. As they left the station, the cool night air hit their face, offering a small sense of relief. But the questions lingered. Why had Karen gone to such lengths to fabricate a story? What did she hope to gain by dragging the police into this? And, most importantly, would she stop at nothing to ruin Alex's reputation? Driving home, Alex replayed the events in their mind, trying to piece together how Karen had pulled it off. Clearly, she wasn't above using fear and intimidation to get her way. But Alex also knew that giving in to anger wouldn't solve anything. Tomorrow would bring a fresh start and hopefully a chance to set the record straight once and for all. The next morning, Alex woke up feeling like they'd been hit by a truck. The events of the previous day replayed in their mind on a loop. Karen's threats, the flashing police lights, the cold interrogation room, and finally, Sheriff Mike, stepping in to save the day. While they were grateful for Mike's intervention, the whole ordeal left a bitter taste in their mouth. Something about it didn't sit right. Karen hadn't just crossed a line. She'd bulldozed over it, dragging law enforcement into what should have been a minor disagreement. Alex knew they couldn't let this slide. If Karen thought she could get away with twisting the truth and weaponizing 911 calls, who was to say she wouldn't try something worse next time? More importantly, if the community saw no consequences for her actions, it would set a dangerous precedent. People might start believing they could act recklessly without accountability. That wasn't the kind of neighborhood Alex wanted to live in or lead. With that thought firmly planted in their mind, Alex decided it was time to take action. They picked up the phone and called an emergency HOA meeting, scheduling it for later that week. The announcement sent ripples through the community. Word spread quickly, fueled by whispers at the coffee shop, gossip during morning walks, and texts exchanged between neighbors. Everyone had questions. What was the meeting about? Was there going to be drama? And most importantly, how did Alex end up in handcuffs? By the time the evening of the meeting rolled around, the community center was packed. Residents filled every seat, some even standing along the walls or spilling out into the hallway. It wasn't often that an HOA meeting drew this much attention, but curiosity had gotten the better of everyone. Alex stood at the front of the room, flanked by members of the board, and took a deep breath before addressing the crowd. "Thanks for coming tonight," Alex began, their voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I know this isn't our usual monthly gathering, and I appreciate you all taking the time to be here. There's been a lot of talk lately about, well, me, and I think it's important we clear the air." The room fell silent as Alex launched into their story. They started from the beginning, explaining how Karen had stormed into the HOA office, accusing them of mishandling landscaping policies. They described the heated argument, Karen's threats, and the surreal experience of being hauled off to the police station, all because of a fabricated claim. To back up their account, Alex pulled up security footage from the office camera system on a projector screen. The grainy but unmistakable video showed Karen barging in uninvited pacing, angrily, and leaving in a huff. There was no sign of Alex refusing to leave or causing any disturbance. Next, Alex shared screenshots of emails and documents proving their authority as HOA president. These included official letters confirming their election, meeting minutes, where decisions were voted on, and even messages from residents thanking Alex for their hard work. Each piece of evidence painted a clear picture. Karen's accusations were baseless, and her attempt to involve the police bordered on malicious. When Alex finished presenting their case, the room erupted into murmurs. Some people nodded knowingly, while others looked shocked. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Karen's turn to speak. She sat near the back of the room, arms crossed tightly over her chest, glaring daggers at Alex. When called upon, she rose reluctantly, her heels clicking against the floor as she made her way to the front. "I stand by what I said," Karen declared, her voice sharp and defensive. "This person has abused their power and ignored the rules. They think they're above everyone else, making decisions without consulting us. This so-called evidence is just more manipulation." Her words hung in the air, but instead of rallying support, they seemed to fall flat. Several residents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, exchanging skeptical glances. One man raised his hand hesitantly and spoke up. "Actually, I've seen those emails too. Alex forwarded them to me when I asked about the new hedge policy. Everything checks out." Another neighbor chimed in. "Yeah, and remember last summer, when Karen complained about my garden gnomes? She said they violated some rule that doesn't even exist. Turns out, she just didn't like how they looked." One by one, people began sharing their own experiences with Karen. A woman recounted how Karen had reported her for having a bird bath that was too colorful. A retiree talked about receiving a formal warning for parking his RV in his driveway even, though the HOA guidelines explicitly allowed it. As the stories piled up, it became painfully obvious that Karen's behavior wasn't isolated to Alex. She had a pattern of targeting neighbors, escalating minor issues, and using intimidation tactics to get her way. Karen listened to all of this with growing agitation, her face turning red. When someone suggested she apologize for wasting police resources, she snapped, "You're all blind followers. Fine, believe whatever you want, but mark my words, this isn't over." Her dramatic exit drew a few chuckles from the audience, but the mood quickly shifted back to seriousness. After a brief discussion, the board voted unanimously to issue Karen a formal warning. If she continued her disruptive behavior, she risked losing her voting privileges within the HOA. It wasn't a perfect solution after all. Karen still lived in the community, but it was a step toward holding her accountable. As the meeting wrapped up, Alex felt a mix of relief and determination. They had laid everything out in the open, trusting their neighbors to see the truth. And while the outcome wasn't perfect, it was progress. On the drive home, Alex reflected on the evening. For the first time in days, they allowed themselves to feel hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, the tide was turning. In the days following the emergency HOA meeting, a strange calm settled over Lake Ranch. For years, Karen had been a constant presence in the neighborhood, always lurking, always watching, always ready to pounce on the slightest infraction. But now she seemed to retreat into the shadows. Her warning from the board hung over her like a dark cloud, and though she didn't admit it publicly, everyone could tell she was rattled. Alex noticed the change almost immediately. Gone were the daily complaints about hedges being too tall, or cars parked in the wrong spot. Gone were the passive-aggressive flyers slipped under doors or the pointed stares during community events. At first, Alex wondered if Karen had finally decided to back off for good. Maybe the public shaming at the meeting had knocked some sense into her. Or maybe she was simply biding her time, waiting for the right moment to strike again. But as the weeks passed, something even more surprising happened. people started talking. Not just about Karen, but about everything. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves began reaching out to Alex, sharing their thoughts and concerns. Some thanked them for standing up to Karen, while others confessed they'd been intimidated by her for years but never knew how to speak up. It was as if the dam had burst, releasing a flood of pent-up frustrations and unspoken truths. One afternoon, as Alex was walking their dog around the lake, they ran into an older couple who lived a few streets over. The husband, a retired teacher, stopped them with a smile. "Hey, we just wanted to say thanks," he said, his voice warm and sincere. "You've done a lot for this place and we're glad you're here." His wife nodded enthusiastically. "We used to love living here, but lately it felt like we were walking on eggshells all the time." That woman made everything so tense. Now things feel lighter. Alex smiled, touched by their words. "I'm really happy to hear that," they replied. "That's exactly why I stepped up to make this a better place for all of us." The conversation lingered in Alex's mind long after the couple had gone. It wasn't just flattery, it was validation. All those late nights spent reviewing policies, mediating disputes, and planning community events, it was worth it. And yet, there was still work to be done. While Karen's influence had waned, her shadow loomed large. People were wary, unsure if the peace would last. Alex knew they couldn't let their guard down, not yet. Meanwhile, rumors about Karen began circulating. No one had seen much of her since the meeting, which only fueled speculation. Some claimed she was moving away, tired of the drama she'd stirred up. Others whispered that she was plotting her next move, determined to regain control. A few neighbors even joked that she might show up at the next HOA gathering wearing camouflage, ready to launch a stealth attack. Then, one crisp Saturday morning, confirmation came. An envelope appeared in Alex's mailbox, a formal letter from Karen's lawyer. It was short and to the point, stating that Karen intended to sell her house and relocate due to personal reasons. There was no mention of regret or apology, just cold facts wrapped in legal jargon. Alex read it twice, half expecting some hidden insult buried between the lines. But there was nothing, just a quiet acknowledgement that Karen's reign of terror was coming to an end. News of her departure spread quickly through the neighborhood. Reactions were mixed. Some residents celebrated openly, hosting impromptu gatherings to toast the occasion. Others expressed relief, glad to see the tension dissipate without further conflict. A small handful, however, felt uneasy. They worried about what Karen might do next, whether she'd badmouth Lake Ranch to potential buyers or find another community to terrorize. Despite these lingering concerns, life at Lake Ranch slowly returned to normal, or at least a new version of normal. Without Karen breathing down their necks, neighbors grew more comfortable interacting with each other. The weekly farmers market became a lively hub of activity, with kids playing tag and adults swapping recipes. Even the annual summer barbecue, which had been canceled for the past 2 years due to low turnout, made a triumphant comeback. Alex played a big role in fostering this renewed sense of community. They organized workshops on gardening and home maintenance, set up a neighborhood watch program, and encouraged residents to share ideas for improving the area. One of their proudest accomplishments was creating a Welcome Wagon initiative, where newcomers received a basket of local goodies and a handwritten note introducing themselves to the neighborhood. It was a small gesture, but it went a long way toward making Lake Ranch feel like home. Of course, not everything was perfect. There were still disagreements about noise levels, pet policies, and holiday decorations, but they were handled with civility rather than hostility. When conflicts arose, people turned to Alex for guidance, trusting them to mediate fairly. Over time, Alex realized that leadership wasn't about having all the answers. It was about listening, empathizing, and finding solutions that worked. For everyone, as for Karen, her absence left a void, but not the kind anyone missed. Rumor had it she'd moved to another gated community, one with stricter rules and higher fees. Whether she found happiness there was anyone's guess, but most residents preferred not to dwell on it. Instead, they focused on building a brighter future for Lake Ranch, one where kindness and cooperation took center stage. For Alex, the ordeal had been both a challenge and a lesson. They learned that standing your ground isn't easy, especially when faced with false accusations or legal trouble. But they also discovered the power of transparency, accountability, and community solidarity. By refusing to back down, they had inspired others to do the same, and together, they had created something truly special. On a sunny afternoon, as Alex strolled along the lakeshore with their dog trotting happily beside them, they paused to take in the view. The water sparkled in the sunlight, reflecting the vibrant colors of autumn leaves. Children laughed nearby, tossing sticks for their dogs to chase. For the first time in a long while, Alex felt a deep sense of contentment. Life wasn't perfect, but it was better, and sometimes that was enough. The weeks turned into months, and Lake Ranch transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The absence of Karen's constant complaints and accusations created a void, but instead of chaos, the neighborhood filled it with something far more valuable: connection. Neighbors who had once avoided eye contact now waved hello as they passed each other on morning walks. Families gathered for potluck dinners, sharing stories and laughter over plates of homemade food. Even the local coffee shop saw an uptick in customers as people lingered longer to chat about everything from gardening tips to weekend plans. For Alex, this shift was both rewarding and humbling. They hadn't set out to be a hero or change the fabric of their community when they took on the role of HOA president. All they wanted was to bring some fairness and transparency to a system that often felt broken. But somewhere along the way, their actions sparked something bigger, a sense of unity and trust that many residents hadn't experienced before. One crisp autumn afternoon, Alex found themselves sitting on a bench by the lake, watching kids toss stones into the water while parents chatted nearby. A young boy tripped over his shoelaces but was immediately helped up by another child, their giggles echoing across the shoreline. It was a simple moment, yet it reminded Alex why all the stress and drama had been worth it. This was what community was supposed to look like: people looking out for one another, not tearing each other down. As they sat there, lost in thought, someone approached them. It was Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman who lived 2 streets over. She carried a basket filled with fresh apples and handed one to Alex with a smile. "Thought you might like these," she said warmly. "They're from my tree. I know how much work you've put into keeping this place running smoothly." Alex accepted the apple gratefully, touched by the gesture. "Thank you so much," they replied. "But honestly, none of this would have happened without everyone pitching in. We did this together." Mrs. Thompson nodded knowingly. "Maybe, but you were the one who stood your ground when things got tough. Not everyone would have done that." Her words stayed with Alex long after she walked away. Standing your ground wasn't easy. It meant facing criticism, dealing with conflict, and sometimes even risking your reputation. But it also meant showing others that they didn't have to tolerate bullying or unfairness. By refusing to back down against Karen, Alex had sent a powerful message. Accountability matters, and kindness can triumph over intimidation. Not that everything was perfect. There were still occasional disagreements, as there always are in any community. One neighbor complained about the noise from a late-night party, while another argued that the holiday lights competition was too competitive. But these disputes were handled differently now, with open communication and mutual respect, rather than threats and accusations. Alex made sure every voice was heard during meetings, encouraging compromise and collaboration whenever possible. One evening, during a particularly lively gathering at the community center, someone suggested starting a tradition, a yearly Neighbor Appreciation Day. The idea caught on quickly. Residents volunteered to organize games, bake goods, and even host talent shows. When the first event rolled around, it became clear just how far the neighborhood had come. Kids performed skits, adults competed in friendly relay races, and everyone enjoyed a massive barbecue feast under twinkling string lights. At the end of the night, Alex stood up to say a few words. "I just want to thank all of you," they began, their voice steady but filled with emotion. "When I first stepped into this role, I wasn't sure if I could make a difference. But seeing how far we've come together has shown me what real community spirit looks like. None of us are perfect, and we won't always agree on everything. But as long as we keep talking, listening, and supporting each other, we'll continue to grow stronger." The room erupted in applause, and several people gave Alex heartfelt hugs afterward. For the first time in a long while, they felt truly appreciated, not because they were flawless, but because they had tried their best. Meanwhile, rumors about Karen occasionally surfaced, though they grew fewer and farther between. Some said she'd struggled to adapt to her new neighborhood, where strict rules clashed with her desire for control. Others claimed she missed Lake Ranch but refused to admit it. Whatever the truth, most residents preferred to focus on the present rather than dwell on the past. Karen's shadow had lifted, leaving behind a brighter, more hopeful community. A quiet winter evening, as snow blanketed the rooftops and trees, Alex stood on their porch sipping hot cocoa. The street lights cast soft glows onto the freshly fallen snow, creating a serene, almost magical atmosphere. Their dog curled up at their feet, snoring softly. For a moment, Alex allowed themselves to reflect on everything that had happened, the challenges, the victories, and the unexpected friendships they'd forged along the way. Life wasn't perfect, and it never would be. There would always be obstacles to overcome and difficult decisions to make. But Alex had learned something important. Progress isn't about achieving perfection. It's about moving forward, step by step, even when the path is rocky. And sometimes, the smallest actions like standing up for what's right or lending a helping hand can create ripples that touch countless lives. As they watched the snowflakes drift lazily from the sky, Alex smiled to themselves. Lake Ranch wasn't just a place anymore, it was home. And thanks to the collective efforts of its residents, it was becoming the kind of place where everyone belonged. With that comforting thought, Alex closed the door behind them, ready to face whatever came next. After all, they had proven time and again that no challenge was insurmountable, not when you had a community standing beside you.